Hello, I'm Shu from Intercycle Astrology, and this is my YouTube channel. And to commemorate the ingress of Jupiter moving into Taurus in May 2023, I'd like to do a show on the Jupiter cycle. And I can't think of anyone better to talk Jupiter cycles than the wonderful Alex Trenoweth, who is an astrologer, educator and author and researcher who's done a lot of research on Jupiter cycles in relation to child development and adolescence development. So welcome to the show, Alex.
Thank you very much, Shu.
There's a little bit of a delay in the recording, so just be patient with us, everybody. But Alex is, well, I know Alex as the Director of Education at Kepler College, where I also teach, but I know you're one of the busiest astrologers going around and you wear many hats. So can you tell us a little bit about what you do and how is it that you became involved with all these different organizations and wonderful astrological events?
I blame it on Venus and Gemini, really. And also, I was talking about Jupiter. I have Jupiter in Cancer on its exalted degree.
That's
So,
nice.
I mean, I really do network very, very well. And there's other things going on. My friend Richard Fiddler, who's a Vedic astrologer, will tell you that it's all about my Venus sextile my moon in Leo. That helps me make friends and makes connections, and I'll talk to anybody. That's how
You
I
have some very
got
nice
so involved in so
placements.
many different things. Yes.
Got-
So I just love meeting people, love knowing what they're doing. Even if they don't align to my points of view, I like to talk to them and get to know what they're doing.
So you're involved with Kepler, but you're also involved, you're also an educator as well. Like, so you wear two hats, right? As an astrologer as well as a teacher. Was it we call it primary school, which is the lower school, or high school teacher? So which levels do you teach?
Okay, so I started off teaching secondary school, which is children from ages 11 to 18. But I left full-time education because I travel so much, because in secondary school, there isn't a need for supply teachers because they cover internally. So now I primarily teach the younger children, which is ages 3 to 11. So I could be teaching 9-year-olds in the morning and go back to teaching 5-year-olds in the afternoon, and any day of the week. So I'm extremely flexible and very I can just do anything now. I've been a teacher for so long, and we'll talk about this later. I fully credit astrology for keeping me in the profession for so long when teachers find it very difficult to stay in it.
Well, let's talk about it now. I mean, for people that don't know, Alex has written a book called Growing Pains, which is her research on uh, a child's development, I guess, through the cycles of Jupiter and Saturn. Is that a good enough summary, or can you elaborate on this for the audience?
The book came out of 12 years of observing how children learn. So just to backtrack a little bit about how I got involved, I struggled to learn how to be a teacher because it's quite an unnatural skill. And we saw a lot of this when we went into lockdown, and parents suddenly had to be the teachers, and siblings became your classmates. And, parents found it, enormously difficult to teach because their memory of teaching is that you get lectured 60 minutes, someone talking at you, you take notes, and then you're tested on it. And that's not teaching at all in the way we do it now. It's very chunked down. So you give a child an explanation, teach them something, give them a chance to learn it, secure that learning, come back to it, go on to the next task. It's nothing about being on their shoulder for 60 minutes. So I spent a lot of time in lockdown teaching parents how to teach. And it was very interesting because it's funny how we remember things. That's not the way we learn at all. And then So sorry, going back again. When I was first learning how to teach, I was very frustrated. It is a taxing job, you know.
Mhm.
You got 30 kids in a classroom. You know, parents talk about having 1, 2, or 3 or 4 children. You know, I got 30 children, all the same age, and they were adolescents, and they were a challenge. And I remember thinking, oh, this is not the profession for me. I don't have the time, the patience. I'm exhausted emotionally, physically, you know, in every
Yep.
sort of way. And then I looked out at them and I thought, haha, you guys all have the same Jupiter sign. And
Mhm.
that's when I went from being a teacher on the edge to being a teacher on a different kind of edge. So I became a lot happier once I understood how my children learn. And now, astrologers will ask me, isn't Mercury the planet of learning? And I'm going to say no, because Mercury was the messenger of the gods. You know,
Mhm.
all he had to do was, you know, repeat the messages and bring them to the other gods. So Mercury is about rote learning. So when a teacher holds up the letter T and says, "What sound does this make?" the children say "t t t t." That is rote learning. That's memorizing a certain thing. Now Jupiter takes that "t t t" and turns it into words, turns it
Mhm.
into sentences, turns it into paragraphs that will eventually become essays and bigger thoughts. So we get the idea that Jupiter is about expansion, about having that confidence to turn little things into great big things.
Well, to me,
So once
Jupiter
I
is.
understood
Oh,
that, and I went through,
oh, sorry. Oh, to me, that just
go
reminds me of
ahead.
Jupiter being the bridge. You know, it makes connections. It's a hot and moist kind of planet, helps to connect the dots, to make bridges between the upper and the lower realms, to fuse spirit into matter, that kind of thing. So in that case, it's like turning letters into words and words into sentences.
Yeah, I remember Jupiter was the god of gods. You know, he had omniscience. You know, he looked down on us. He made judgments. You know, so he had this whole entire view of mankind, and that is what learning is. It's learning about, you know, different cultures and different philosophies and different religions, and it's, you know, putting them together, like you say, making a bridge.
Yeah, yeah. And so, in terms of the Jupiter cycle, like how does this describe learning styles of a particular child?
Well, so I took I my educational background is in psychology, and so, you know, I learned from Jean Piaget, you know, a late 19th century astrologer, and he had this idea about how children learn in stages. And also from Eric Erikson, who had a similar notion about how we socialize in stages. And I thought, okay, this has to be something that we can use in astrology. So I started looking at stages of development, and I realized, wow, you know, a lot of these apply to the Jupiter cycle if we're observant enough. So let's look at the first Jupiter square. So what I'm talking about is when transiting Jupiter is square to your natal position, and this happens at around the age of 3 years old. So any um, child psychologist, never mind if they're an astrologer or not, any child psychologist will tell you that children can usually walk without assistance at the age of 3. They can be understood by strangers, and they are usually toilet trained, odd accident aside. And, you know, if you think about it, this gives the parents, you know, the freedom, because they're not tied down by diapers or strollers or pushchairs. And if a child wanders off and gets lost, they can tell an authority figure, you know, what their parent looks like. So it gives the parent enormous amount of freedom, and it allows the child to open up their horizons. So that's
Hmm.
at the age of 3. At the age of 6 is when a lot of people, that's the Jupiter opposition. So transiting Jupiter is opposite to its natal position. And that's when children are starting to really learn how to read. Now, we teach recognition of familiar words from the age of 3, but at the age of 6 is when they're really starting to be able to choose their own books, and they're able to, you know, have a preference for what they want to learn. 9, okay, so one of the things I'm very good at is I'm a storyteller. And, you know, it doesn't matter if the children are 3 or 18, I can usually tell a story that'll keep them entertained. And at the age of 9, it's the only age group that will ask me, are you telling me a story or is this something based on reality? So there's this essence of being able to separate reality from fantasy. So children aren't afraid of the monsters in the closet or the boogeyman under the bed. They're afraid of real things like terrorism, their parents getting divorced or death or a pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the age of around 12 is the Jupiter return. And I really want to shout this out to parents. This is the most important year of a child's life. So as society recognizes this as when children leave the primary school education to the big school. But this is a parent's opportunity to really, if you're going to take a child on a foreign holiday, this is the year to do it. Get them exploring different philosophies, different religions, and prepare them to see the world, because this is when all the brain development really kicks in too. And this is super important because the educational system as it is doesn't recognize this. So parents can't just think that a school is like a babysitting service. They need to get in there too and take an interest in what their child is learning, and become interested in the different subjects the child is teaching them, because this is a window of opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Because once his brain development starts to slow down at around the age of 15, when the Saturn opposition kicks in, it's going to be harder for that child to access the different avenues that were available to them earlier. So it's
Right.
super important in adolescence,
So I do have
because
oh, sorry. There is a bit of a delay, but I might just interject there. That's very relevant to me because I do have a son that is 11, turning 12 next year. And I was thinking, what am I in for? He's coming up for his first Jupiter return. So I wanted to ask you, well, two questions around that. Like, I'll get these two questions in so we can beat the delay. What do we expect at the Jupiter return? And secondly, uh, in Australia, I'm not sure if it is the case in other countries, you have the choice to sort of delay your child starting school. Like you can either start their schooling in grade 5 at 5 years or at 6 years, which is a year that we call preliminary, like prep before grade 1. And so I've opted to start my children later. Have you? So my question is for you that my second question is like, have you got any opinions about whether starting later or earlier um, might impact the way that they learn?
so let's start with your son. So he has Jupiter in Aries or Jupiter in Pisces?
Taurus.
He's got Jupiter in Taurus. Okay, sorry. He's gonna be told that. Okay, so we got to think. I think that a lot of astrologers have no idea what to do with Jupiter or Saturn. And, they think, it's, it's confidence or whatever, but they kind of avoid it and they tend to focus on the sun, moon, and ascendant, which is fine. But, in my profession, I'm not too, I'm not too concerned about a child's personality. I'm concerned about how I'm going to teach them and how they're going to learn.
Mm-hmm.
So Jupiter and Taurus. So let's just expand what Jupiter and Taurus means. So let's start with the sun. So we know that Jupiter and Sun and Jupiter is stubborn. We know that they like to have comfortable things, and we know that they, like to eat. They tend to be quite sensual people. They need to be, if you think about, not that they're cattle in the field, I'm just saying that we think about cows in the field, they are very gentle and placid unless you enrage them, and then they become like a herd and then they charge you. So if we apply those sort of characteristics into how they learn, then we get an idea of how to teach them. So let's start with sensual. They like to look at nice things. They like to have a comfortable surrounding. Um, they want to be, sedate, but they also need to be stimulated, and they like to eat. So they need to take things in. They want to chew it and digest it. They need time to do this, and then they eliminate what they don't need. So if we take that as like how they learn, we can help them pace and, help them collect the things that they need so they can look back on their notes and they can collect the things that they will need to help them progress on to the next stage. And we can be aware that, if we overstimulate them, they're going to gang up on us and overtake us. So it's very important that we're patient with them, that we let them take it all in before we drop in the next bit of information. So I was teaching history to this particular year group. I hate to say how long ago it was. It might have been 24 years ago. And I was teaching the French Revolution. And I could tell they're just sitting there. They were kind of listening, but they weren't listening. And they're great pen chewers too, these Jupiter and Taurus learners. The oral fixation they seem to have. So we got to be careful about that. To get them to, once they start chewing their pens, they're probably not really listening anymore.
Yeah, right.
So what I did was I thought, okay, you guys all got Jupiter and Taurus. Well, for the most part, the class usually for us in the northern hemisphere, Jupiter changes signs in around April every year. So you're going to have two different learners. Probably in that year group, it was a little bit of Jupiter in Taurus and a bit of Jupiter in Gemini. But for the Jupiter and Taurus learners, I thought the majority class had this, and I thought I'm going to set up a French cafe. So I got some, cheap checkered tablecloths, and I got some bread in from the canteen, and I got them all sort of sitting, around eating bread. But I didn't give them anything else but bread. I just let them, enjoy the bread. And pretty soon they started to ask, isn't there any like Marmite or butter or something to put on this? And I was like, oh no, this is what the peasants ate back in, revolutionary France. And I gave one person, checking the allergies first, I gave one person some chocolate to eat in front of them all. And they were like, oh, they were outraged, and they suddenly got it. They understood the difference between being rich and poor in revolutionary France. So that's an example of, teaching Jupiter in Taurus children. But for you as a parent, I would say, just helping your child to organize their learning packs so that they can access it easily and they can add to it like a folder that they can collect what they're learning, because this is the thing about Taurus. They'd like to possess things too. I didn't mention about possessing things, but they like to see how much they have, and that really helps them learn. The reward system works really well too, giving them money or showing them how they can earn money, encourage them to be business people, encourage them how to be sensible and ethical business people as well, because that's the other thing about them. They can be unethical if you don't watch out for what they're doing.
So
that would
true.
be my advice is,
It's
allowing them to, handle money.
yeah, my son, we were talking about just, the portion of money, his pocket money that he could spend, and what he should put in the bank. And he said, I said, is there something you might want to save for? And he said, oh, no, actually, I just like the look of numbers going up. That was his response. And I thought, yeah, he's definitely motivated by money and just having lots of it. So that's very Jupiter and Taurus.
But, teach them how to invest and to multiply that. Because I think the Jupiter in Cancer is more about hoarding the money, hoarding their possessions. But then Jupiter in Taurus has the ability to multiply their finances too. So teaching him how to, how he can invest and make his money, grow exponentially, as opposed to just holding on to it.
Yeah. Right.
Also teach him about being charitable.
Yep.
Helping other people be, successful. Yep. And that'll be a good feeling for all children, but for Jupiter and Taurus especially, being generous and being kind and supporting other people is a good way of helping them learn.
Is there a particular sign that Jupiter may struggle in, like based on what you see in learning styles? Like, what were the most difficult Jupiter placements?
As you might expect, by tradition, Jupiter in Capricorn You have constantly got to be on their case, because they will do the bare minimum. They'll
Oh,
turn it
right.
in all nice and sort of neat, but and they'll sit back and they'll relax and they'll be like, and you got to constantly push them to do more and more and more. So for that particular age group, I constantly have extensions and extra work, and I'm constantly cracking the whip. Do more stuff. Don't just sit back on your laurels. Keep trying, keep expanding. And by contrast, Jupiter and Sagittarius think they know everything. And
Mm,
so I think it's my job to teach them that they don't know everything. You're not better read than me. Just
yep.
because you can, a bit of Shakespeare doesn't mean you know more than me. So it's
Yep.
constantly teaching them, there's more out there in the world. Keep going, keep trying, keep reading, keep expanding. And, they might come up with outrageous opinions, but you just have to point them in the right direction. There are people that are on, that have financial difficulties that need your help. They're the other group that could benefit from doing charitable deeds,
Hmm.
looking at what the breadline really means. The Salvation Army is a very good organization that will allow children to do things that have, like sorting clothes or
Oh, wow.
working in
Soup kitchens.
in their soup kitchens. Yeah, soup kitchens. And that's a good place to to place them if they get too, oh, all you have to do is work harder kind of attitude. Not to show them
Mm.
what it looks like to be poor.
Oh, fascinating. You must be the best teacher. And I love your level of dedication and interest in really like developing the child, instead of, just getting through the day. But coming back to, say, Jupiter return, yeah, we need to talk about, what are the key Jupiter return traits that you've seen? And did your research also cover the second Jupiter return at 24 years?
I do talk about further Jupiter returns because they are important, I think, because, see, these Jupiter development stages are like building blocks. And so, I talked about 3, 6, 9, 12. So they stack up. And we all know from working, with building blocks as kids that the foundation has to be firm and straight. Otherwise, the more blocks we stack on, it becomes an unstable tower and it'll eventually collapse. So,
Mhm.
the Jupiter returns at 12, 36, 48, roughly before 60. They all have, you know, um, they all build on from what we learned before, but they are great stages, good times to expand your horizons. I moved to England on my second Jupiter return. For
Mhm.
example, I was born in Detroit, Michigan, or near Detroit, and I moved to England when I was 24. Um,
Mhm.
and I'm just trying to think. At 48, I think that I left full-time teaching to do a lot of travel. Oh, in fact, that it is correct. I did left full-time teaching to travel around the world.
Mm. Wow,
I
that's
haven't
nice.
had my fifth one, but it's coming. But it's coming up. And so it all expands and it all builds on from what we've done before. So
Right.
yes, those are important stages. And
So
I
book in
specialize in
my
child
holiday
development.
now. Book in my holiday now, would you say, for next year?
I think so. And if for your child, yeah, save your money up, because I'm not saying ignore the other children, because they're not having their Jupiter return. But I am saying that is the time for the family holiday at the age of at the Jupiter return. Get them learning a different language too,
Yeah, right.
and let them explore different religions, as they're going to do naturally when they go to the big school anyway. But do let them explore and try different things.
Sure. And I've heard you on another lecture talk about the Uranus sextile. I think that was it, the Uranus sextile that coincides at the time of a Jupiter, some kind of Jupiter activation. Can you tell us more about what age that is and what that entails? I think that would be the teenage years, wouldn't it?
So at around the age of 13, and it varies from child to child, there will be Jupiter return at 11. And then a couple years later, that transiting Jupiter will sextile its natal position.
Right.
And at the same time, children have their first Ptolemaic aspect from an outer planet, which is Uranus sextile its natal position at 13. And coming from a teacher's perspective, 13 is a year group nobody wants to teach,
Oh,
because
right.
that is when the children become truly rebellious. And also there's a lot of social things going on. Um, Children stop listening to their parents and teachers and start listening to their peers. And this should be a red flag to everyone, because children talking to children, you don't want them talking about the big subjects like sex, drugs, you name it, advice coming from other children. So the best way to teach these difficult subjects is before that happens. So
Mm.
alongside of the experiences with travel and other things, I would say that it's also a good time to have those heart-to-heart talks with children about sexuality, and about drugs, about drinking alcohol, all these things, that will come up eventually as they grow up and find their way towards independence. And, as they grow away from their parents, which is difficult for parents. Parents, want to keep their children safe. And of course, children don't want to be safe. They want to go off and do their own things. And it also brings up issues with the parents, because if you have different Saturn signs, no, we're not talking about Saturn, but if you have different Saturn signs, you have different approaches to discipline.
Mm.
And the example I like to use is, let's say you have a Catholic parent and a parent raised in the Salvation Army. And you think, oh, this is not a problem. We have different philosophies, but this isn't going to be difficult, until that child gets to the age where they want to experiment with alcohol. The Catholic parent will have seen alcohol used in religious ceremonies, in communion, and of course, Salvation Army people are teetotal. And so then you can see where these different philosophies are going to clash. So, I very much like working with people who are asking me the question, what kind of parent will I be? How can I raise my child? And I need to talk to both people, obviously, to see where the difficulties might arise. And so looking at stages of development for parents as well could be extremely beneficial in helping their children or the future children become comfortable and productive adults.
Mm. Absolutely. It's so complex. And I think even, I know you've been a teacher for many years. And do you think there's a huge difference now with the level of complexity that a child has to face compared to when you first started teaching? The whole sexuality piece, gender fluidity, but also like the internet and online resources and the management of all of that. Like, I'm not sure exactly when this book was written, but yeah, what are your thoughts around, say, managing a child's learning in amongst all of this, and in relation to their Jupiter signs and the stages that they're at in their Jupiter cycle?
So, Growing Pains was written in 2013,
Okay.
so it hasn't come up to its Jupiter return yet. But, when I started teaching, the internet wasn't really a thing.
Hmm.
And I remember, when Facebook first started, and as the school's policy was, oh, they were bullied online, so we need to sort it out in school. Well, eventually the school became overwhelmed with complaints about online bullying. So now our policy really is that it's the parents' job to sort this out. And this is one of the reasons why we say no to mobile phones, although I would say that mobile phones can be a good resource, but it's so tricky,
Mm.
because the mobile phones can do so many things that,
Hmm.
even I, with my beautiful iPhone 14, I don't even know what it can do.
Yeah.
And, so I need to be aware that, it's not the same thing as it was when I had my little flip mobile phone, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think that the internet has changed us all enormously. I think that, we're just starting to realize how much, the online um, resources have altered the way that children learn and interact with each other. And going back to lockdown, we can tell, the teachers can tell children who have been engaged with the learning process and those who've been just allowed to play on their mobile phones. The learning gaps are very, very apparent. The socialization abilities are, so obvious. And, so you are absolutely correct in that, the internet has totally transformed, not just the way we learn, but the way we interact with each other. But I have this theory that, we're not so different, no matter how old we are. I look at adults interacting on the internet, and I just think, God, you guys are like children in a playground.
Yeah, or politicians for that
You know,
matter.
well, yeah, definitely politicians. It's just like the way they talk to each other, and I'm just, it makes me laugh, and it makes me despair sometimes. Just thinking, we think that we're so advanced in society, but really we are just 5-year-old.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean that was really interesting what you mentioned about being able to see the difference with lockdown. It makes me think, oh my God, what do my children look like? Because I remember a stage during lockdown where I decided, yep, that's it. I'm quitting. I'm not homeschooling anymore, and we're just going to go and work in the orchard. and everyone got along much better after that. But I was going to ask you about homeschooling. I mean, any experiences or thoughts around that, and how whether these Jupiter cycle, like your research around Jupiter cycles, also kind of could be applied to the homeschooling parent and child.
Yes, and God bless you, homeschooling parents, because
Yes.
I think most lockdown parents would be like, "Oh my God, I'm so glad to get them back into school so I can have my time back." So with homeschooling parents, you're going to be teaching children of different age developments, different stages
Yes.
of development, and different Jupiter cycles. So,
Hmm.
yeah, I think growing pains can be really helpful. So, because we know that children don't of different ages don't learn the same way, and I think this is a mistake that parents made during lockdown. Not that they knew any better or were prepared for it, because it was a surprise to everybody. Your 6-year-old does not learn the same as a 9-year-old, and so you
Hmm.
have to teach them differently. And if you ask teachers, especially teachers who teach different year groups, like secondary school teachers, you could be teaching year 7 who are 11 1 hour, and the next hour you get the 18-year-olds, and you know that they are totally different. You can't teach 18-year-olds the same way you would teach 11-year-olds. It'll never work.
Hmm.
11-year-olds are full of exuberance and full of enthusiasm. 18-year-olds are, a lot more matured and a lot more focused on their future. The brain development has happened, and now they're prepared to, look at the world of work and career. So, I think growing pains can be enormously helpful for parents who are homeschooling their children. And um, uh, the one thing I would say to parents who are homeschooling is just ensure that your children have a wide variety of experiences. Make sure that you get involved with other parents and network out with other parents who are homeschooling, so that you are sharing resources and sharing experiences, so your child gets different points of view as they get older, not just your own point of view.
That's really great advice. Yeah. Yes. And totally blessings to the homeschooling parent, because the area where I live, we have a huge homeschooling community, and I just take my hat off to them, especially after the lockdown experience.
Absolutely.
It was just such a juggle, that juggle of, well, I've got three children, but having the three different ages, and but you know what, the hardest juggle for me was working out the technology part, like, oh, where's the password to this and how do we get into that? And in the end, I got the teachers to just print me handouts. I said, just give me hard copy. I don't want to do anything online. It was just so difficult to get a 5-year-old child to sit in a meeting for more than 2 minutes. Let's put your astrologer's hat on, as opposed to the astrologer teacher's hat on, because as we speak, Jupiter is about to move into Taurus, and I was wanting to kind of pick your brain about, what you might expect to see in the world, or just, wherever Jupiter is transiting, like in Taurus in your chart. Like, what kinds of things does Jupiter activate when it moves through a certain house, and in particular in the sign of Taurus?
So we're already getting, a lot of things about business people.
Mhm,
And so I think that the way that we manage money and possessions, so think about our assets. Our assets are our homes, they're our educational systems. So I think that there's going to be, a shift and a focus on, money and
mhm,
how different people manage their money.
mhm,
So, as astrologers, we know that just because Jupiter is in its later stages of Aries, we're already starting to see things because transits happen over time, not just like on a
mhm,
turn, a quick turn. So I think already we're starting to see just sort of discussions around our financial institutions, and I think with Jupiter and Aries, we tend to skate over these big issues, but when it
mhm,
comes to Taurus, they sit in and roost.
mhm.
And
Absolutely.
uh so I think that we're there's been a lot of talk about banks and concern about financial collapses, but I think as Jupiter moves into Taurus, we are really going to have to face up to what's been going on for the past few years with
Yes.
how money is managed,
Yeah,
and
actually, just
also
oh,
how.
oh no,
Sorry,
just
go
just
ahead.
to just to add to that, I did hear, I can't remember who I heard say, there was just this talk about this whole currency collapse that is expected in this decade, and this is speaking to your piece about the possession aspect of Taurus, but the advice was to start pulling money out of the bank and actually buy stuff with it so that you have some kind of value, like buying silver or buying gold, which is, I think, such a Jupiter and Taurus thing, right? Like you said before, Taurus is a sign not just of money, but of things, of possessions, and that moving towards like having tangible things in your hands when money is doing all sorts of things like turning invisible into this sort of digital currency, and the whole currency collapse. So, yeah, I totally agree that there's big things that's going to be happening in our financial systems.
I mean, I rarely handle actual money anymore,
Hmm.
paper money. I do all my transactions online. And so I do think that that you just said the right thing. Invest in silver, make sure it's protected in some way. That the people that are your legacy, making sure that people have access to these things. When you pass, and there's so many things about security and safety, and as I said about Jupiter and Taurus, learning about multiplying your assets, not just holding on to them, but making sure that they
Mm,
have a way of multiplying. And so the business aspects in terms of, how do you make your money? What's your side hustle? These are all questions that I think are very pertinent to Jupiter and Taurus. And
mm,
they've been on our lips for a long time. But like I say, they're come home to roost with Jupiter and Taurus.
mm. It's like our dreams and ideals need to be tangible now, like no more just talking about it and, you know, being busy about it, like in Jupiter and Aries. It's okay, like put your money where your mouth is. This is like, where are the goods?
It's interesting, just a little sidetrack about the British royal family. I mean, I'm you've probably seen my research on Algol and the royal family. King Charles is going to be have his coronation this week, and I think that there's been a lot of backlash about why are we spending money to keep the royal family going.
Hmm.
And so I think, Jupiter and Taurus is also, going to be tackling this sort of question. Because I'm not confident that the royal family is going to be
Mm.
um something that's going to last into the next few years.
Right. Well,
But that
that's
might have
interesting.
something to do with
Yeah, well, that's interesting because the Pluto in Aquarius piece I found had a big theme of colonialism. Back in the 1500s, when Pluto moved into Aquarius, um, it was Queen Elizabeth that was born, who really set off when she was in reign on this big colonial conquest around the world. And the next Pluto in Aquarius instance, the late 1700s, for Australians, that was when the first fleet arrived in Australia and colonialism started in Australia. And
Mhm.
just as the last Pluto in Aquarius event just took place in March, there was huge talk about, well, a referendum in place for Aboriginal Australians to get a voice in Parliament. So you can see that trend of like colonialism and I guess the West changing, like this idea of the Western collapse, changing in some way, and this kind of ties in with this Jupiter and Taurus working on the collapse of the financial systems first. You can see how that process is unfolding, and it's very interesting times that we are living in.
Yes, indeed. Wow.
Yeah.
Um, how did you deal with Pluto's ingress? Did you have I had a little special ceremony. Did you have
Oh,
anything
did
that would
you?
help you prepare? Yeah.
Um, I didn't plan it, but I actually had a very rare opportunity to see a Turkish diviner. He read my coffee cups and did a lead pouring. So that was an interesting thing. And I thought, oh, maybe this, and Pluto's, moving into my first house. I thought, oh, maybe this is how I'll see in the next 20 years, living with more divination, perhaps. But no, I'm interested to hear about your ceremony.
I was in Istanbul. I was at Onur
Oh,
Dosar's conference, and obviously Pluto was about to ingress, and so I thought to myself, I'm going to have a Haman, the
oh,
Turkish bath
beautiful.
and things like that. So they scrub off, they scrub your scrub all the rubbish off you. I mean, so much dead skin and dirt that accumulates on you. And then I had a massage, and then I was able to welcome Pluto into its new sign, all fresh and clean.
Right.
But it's
Regenerated.
interesting, like you pointed out, when I talk to people about it, a lot of people without planning it have actually done something to welcome Pluto into its new sign. And I'm asking this because I think it's also important for us to welcome Jupiter into its new
Mm,
sign. And
mm,
we can prepare for it. We got a few weeks to prepare for it. But I think Pluto is something that happens quite suddenly and it's transformational. But with Jupiter, it requires thinking ahead and planning the
mm,
steps because we're going to learn something.
mhm,
And so I'm just kind of getting you listeners out there to be thinking, what do you want to learn
mm,
with Jupiter and Taurus? How do you want your money to grow and expand, and what do you need to get rid of? Because Jupiter's not just about consuming, it's also about eliminating. Think about the cow. It takes in and also gives out. And so think about, something to do with welcoming Jupiter in. And you can do that in any sort of way that you like. But I would suggest that, it's something to do with learning, something to do
mhm,
with, how do you manage your possessions, and, what do you need to get rid of, and do something.
mhm.
Have a
That's
nice have
really
a nice
great.
dinner. That's
Yeah,
very Jupiter and Taurus.
yes,
Invest in a
Taurus
nice dinner.
being, yeah, the sign of Venus, very indulgent, very rich and abundant sign, isn't it? Yeah, or getting to the earth,
And you got a
being
few
in,
weeks to save for it.
yeah, exactly. Uh,
Perfect.
yep, the earth thing. And yeah,
Perfect.
that's
Get into the
really,
garden.
yeah, really great advice. Plant a tree, maybe, like plant a tree that will, and watch that tree develop over the 12 years. You'll see the symbolism of those quarter, you know,
Oh gosh, how beautiful. I didn't think about that. Plant some carrots. So, you got some, you know, did you know how overpriced carrots are these days?
oh, really?
And this is something, yeah. This is something too, now that we're talking about, food prices.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of people don't even use their gardens to plant food for free. You know, they just think, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I just got to go buy a bag of carrots at the supermarket. Well, maybe think about, you know, getting your garden in order so you don't have to, you know, at least you get vegetables, and, you know, you don't have to pay those
Mm.
overcharged vegetables, and you don't have to worry about pesticides and all the other sort of stuff that you need to
Sure, sure, yeah, because
worry about when you buy food.
That Jupiter symbolism is that symbolism of abundance, or even excess to that matter. Like, so, like taking, making use of that, and yeah, just growing a tree just for the hell of it, just so that you can share food. And I do actually have an example of um, in June 1999, so 24 years ago, when Jupiter made its ingress into Taurus. The kids from the 90s will remember that Napster, which was an online peer-to-peer file sharing software, came on board, and all of a sudden we were getting music for free. And music being a signification of Venus, who rules Taurus. And so this the free food, kind of abundant food example, kind of reminded me of Napster, where wherever Jupiter goes, it kind of is generous. It just gives and it offers, and there's excess. And so in that 24-year ago Jupiter in Taurus example, we had all of a sudden free music, which we were paying, well, in Australia, $30-40 for a new CD of an album, and we were all of a sudden getting it for free. Never mind that it was essentially pirated material, which, obviously that was too good to be true, and it got taken down, and now we're paying for streaming. But yeah, that was an interesting case that I found. And just on that, back to the monetary discussion that we're having of Jupiter and Taurus. Last time Jupiter went into Taurus, we also had Christine Lagarde become the first woman to be appointed as the head of the International Monetary Fund, the biggest bank in the world. So what was interesting about her too was that she was born with Jupiter in the first degrees of Virgo. So when Jupiter moved into Taurus, she was going through a Jupiter trine. So that would have been her yes, it would have been her waning Jupiter trine. So yeah, so what does your research say about the trines of Jupiter, or were you just looking at the squares of Jupiter?
That's a very common question that astrologers ask me, and I'm not dismissing the soft aspects, but I like to look at the hard aspects.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I'm doing this is because one of the things that Erik Erikson said, he says that about stages of development is that, you know, two conflicting ideas have to find a resolution.
Mm.
And I like this idea of the square aspect being a challenge, that we have to make a decision on how we're going to resolve it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I see trines as being kind of like nice weather. We don't really appreciate the nice weather until it rains again. Then we think, oh, it was a lovely day yesterday. I should have taken advantage of it. So as
Mm-hmm.
long as we're aware of the trines, but in this politician's case, you know, she obviously something happened that allowed her to move into her new position quickly. So that's why I focus on the hard aspects.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so I don't really look at trines too much, because people just aren't aware of them as much as they are as the challenging aspects.
Yeah, I agree. Like the hard aspects just produce a result, like something tangible comes of it.
Yes.
Whereas a trine can be maybe felt internally, just a feeling of being like feeling really awesome about something, and you don't really nothing, nothing might happen out of it, or it may, but generally it's more internally felt. But there was an opposition though when Will and Kate had their royal wedding at the last Jupiter in Taurus event in 2011. So both of them were going through a Jupiter opposition. So now that's pretty public show. And interesting to note that 12 years later, when Jupiter is moving into Taurus again, Prince Charles is going to be going through the coronation. So that was an interesting coincidence there, or not.
We need to keep an eye on the royal family, because a lot of them have connections with fixed signs in the early degrees. So
Mm.
it's very exciting, very interesting. I think what's happening in, you know, with the British royal family. So, that opposition when William and Kate got married, I mean, they're fascinating people in that, they're in the public eye, and Princess Diana died when William was just having his Saturn opposition, and poor little Harry was just having his Jupiter return. So
Ah.
both of them were in this very key stage of development when their mother died. And of course, it all happened not just in front of them, but in front of the world. And, I whenever someone mentions, when the princes get upset about the media intrusions, I just always think, but look what happened with their mother. Look, and this is why those boys, those men are traumatized, because it happened in this key stage of development. So, I have an enormous amount of sympathy for Harry, for being protective of his wife, and Prince William as well, for being protective of his family. And maybe this is something else, or maybe another topic. Maybe we get to Jupiter and Gemini when we come again into looking at, how we spread news and how we, disseminate information. But I think that, these are all things to ponder over the next year or so.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah. Well, that's absolutely fascinating. I've really, you are a wealth of knowledge to be able to just reel off the top of your head all these significant milestones in development. I guess it shows your experience as a teacher and actually working with the astrology in practice. Just before we end, I'm just curious to know, like, did you do this all in secrecy, or like, did the schools know about this, or what did they think of your book? Is it a case of begging for
So
forgiveness?
my given name isn't Alex. Alex is
Oh,
actually my confirmation name. So I have another name, which I don't use. And the only people that use this other name, my legal name, are like doctors and bankers, people I don't want to hear from. So when I first started teaching and they were calling me by my legal name, I said, I haven't been called this name for many years. Do you mind calling me Alex? And so the head teacher must have done some research on Google, and I was formally summoned into her office the following morning. And she told me, she says, if any parents complain about you being an astrologer, you could lose your job, because you're bringing the school into disrepute.
what
So
year was
it was,
this?
so I was like, oh my gosh. Ooh, we're talking about, ooh, 2000, I think,
Okay, so
2002 maybe.
astrology was still
And
pretty unpopular at that stage.
yeah, well, and also, I mean, because I was new to my profession, I didn't have the confidence to even question that. I was just like, oh my gosh, okay, you can call me by my other name. But now, if anybody dares, you know, anybody dares to even, I'm gonna plead religious persecution. I got a whole speech memorized. But back then I was just a new astrologer. But banning me from doing something is a sure way of is a sure way of guaranteeing I'm going to find a way to sneak it in. So my first thing that I did, because we have students' data, and this might change eventually. We have the birth data, dates of birth, not time, of course. And I thought it'd be a great idea to experiment with sun signs. And so I put them all into elements. So I had the fire signs in one section, the earth signs in the next, air signs, and water signs. And I thought, isn't this brilliant? Aren't I a genius? But if you're a teacher listening to this, don't do that, because what happened, of course, was the fire signs took over. The air signs shouted over the sign, over the heads of the earth signs. The earth signs just kind of sat there in a silent shock, and the water signs started to hug themselves and self-soothe. So it wasn't a brilliant idea. But then, and also it's really hard to manage all that. And another reason why Mercury isn't the sign of learning. I mean, I could probably get used to getting their sun signs or their Mercury signs, like getting used to their names, but that would take a lot of time. Whereas Jupiter is really easy. I could tell just by looking at a child, where the Jupiter is, because of their size.
Ah,
So, that was my experience. That was my experience in using astrology at the beginning. But now I just get on with it quietly. so occasionally somebody recognizes me and asks me some stuff. But I'm not that famous. people are aware of what I do as an astrologer. In the educational field, in the astrology field, it's a little bit different. But in the educational field, people don't realize I'm an astrologer. I don't talk about it unless I'm asked, or somebody, occasionally in the staff room brings up astrology, and then I let them have it because they're fair game then because they brought it up first. But
Yeah, right. Well, you
it's not
certainly
usually
are. You certainly are famous in the astrology world anyway. I think I see you everywhere. Yeah, I mean, it's been so great to talk to you and so generous of you to share this knowledge. Can you tell us, well, firstly, where we can get this book? And I'll definitely put it in the description below. And also what you've got going on. Are you doing consultations or teaching or anything like that that we need to know about?
You can get the book on Amazon. Growing Pains is on Amazon, Astrology and Adolescence. I just got back from a 5-week tour, and I'd like to blame my messy background on the fact that I haven't really unpacked. But the truth is, this is what my background tends to look like when
Gonna
I
say.
don't have my green screen up, which is folded up in the corner. So yeah, pardon my messiness. And so yeah, it's available on. A book is available on Amazon. Yes, I do consultations. Now, I tend to do family consultations. So I work with parents and children. And just a little piece of advice for astrologers: don't work with under 18s on your own. I have lots of other materials on my website, which is creatively called alextrenoweth.com, which you can get advice on how to work with families and children, but never have consults for children on your own. And at plans, I'm always got something going on. People ask me, when I was on my tour, oh, that was a nice holiday. And I'm like, holiday? Do you know how hard that was? Do you know how hard I work? What I got going on? And the fact that, I don't think I had any breaks at all during that
No, I
so-called
mean,
holiday.
how
So
many conferences did you speak at and interviews or something? I saw you had such a busy schedule.
I did two major conferences. I scheduled. I think now that the it's up to the 6 conferences over the next year. So I got a North American tour coming up over the summer, and a lot of interviews, which I'm always happy to do. And on top of that, I'm doing my book, a couple other books. I got so many things going on, and plus, I'm director of education for Kepler College, which keeps me on my toes too. So lots of stuff going on. Um, I don't. Yeah, follow me on social media if you want to know what I'm doing, because I tend to be a little bit more. I like the microblogging better than the big blogging that I used to do. So
Hmm.
I post my stuff up there, so that's a better way of following me. Alex Trenoweth everywhere. I don't have the time to make up clever handles.
Right.
So just find me on Instagram, Alex Trenoweth.
Yep, sure. I'll make sure I'll put all the links in the description below as I share all of this stuff. And also just to let everyone know, I am teaching a 2-week Firdaria workshop for Kepler College that will be starting in June. So I'll put the links for that below as well, and that will all be on my website and the Kepler College website as well. I'll be teaching the Solar Returns 5-week course again this year as well, which will be in the US summer program. I think that's July, August. So stay tuned for that one. So, Alex, thank you so much again for being on the show and to sharing your insights with us. And we look forward to, following you and seeing, your new book come out. And yeah, for everyone else, so make sure you head on over to Alex Trenoweth on all the social media platforms and follow her work. And as always, you can support our channel by subscribing and sharing this with other parents or teachers that you know, because this is all really, really great advice. And I'll be listening to this again to, get some more tips for myself as a parent. So thank you again, and we hope to see you at the next episode.